Smile. Look pretty.
Exactly.
Hi, everyone.
I'm going to actually make that the intro. You just welcomed everyone in. Hey, friends. Welcome to the Determinetruth Podcast, where we equip the church to be the church. The power of me getting
just for the record, we haven't started yet.
Oh, we did, baby.
If Vinnie includes this in the video, I will delete it.
Because that's the thing. We're on video now. So welcome again. Welcome in if you're a regular listener. We definitely have a YouTube feed that you can check out. And please, as we start off, even if you're just an audio person, you're like, hey, I don't listen to podcasts on YouTube. I don't do the YouTube thing. That's fine. Help us out. Can you go and subscribe to the Determinetruth channel? There's a link in the show notes on the audio version. If you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe, especially as we first start getting going on these things. We need to bump these up in the algorithm. So like it if you like it. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, do the things. And we know that a number of you guys are watching. So if you could help us as we get going, that would be greatly appreciated. And this is something where I've mentioned before. I've spent years watching YouTube videos and the people always say, please do this. And I'm like, it's not that important, or other people will do it. And no, it's so important. Please do that if you will. And that would help us out. But anyway,
our goal by the end of the year is 40 million subscribers.
And I think that's doable.
We're almost there.
Like 40 million in what, like 8 weeks or something?
Yeah.
Come on.
Come on. You guys can do it.
We believe in you.
And you're great. Will your reward be in heaven?
So many mansions.
Oh, so many.
So many mansions. Hey, we're in 2 Thessalonians.
You're
not
gonna be walking
John,
around like this forever because the chains of gold
of the jewelry we have.
Yeah, it's gonna be great.
We're not in John 15 today.
This crown's
we're in 2 Thessalonians. So let's do that.
Okay.
Let's
we can't do what we normally do, can we? We can't just
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So just that's the biggest thing with this new podcast. We can't just stop and edit. And the good news is that would have been a rant that probably would have lasted 15 minutes if we knew we could edit it out.
Hey,
But whatever. Hey, people aren't here for the banter. They're here for the Bible. That should be our quote or our tagline.
Ooh,
Do you like that?
good.
Yeah, the alliteration there. So we're in 2 Thessalonians, which bleeds into some end time stuff. So we have been talking about some eschatology. 2 Thessalonians, we started last week. And just as a reminder about structure, we talked about how there's kind of two main sections, chapters 2 and 3.
Right.
I'm going to start with chapter 2 and read the first 4 verses just to get us going.
Let me bring it up.
I'm going to read it. So I'm going to read from the NRSV. I was all ready to go,
Bible.
And Roberto was not.
There you go.
There we go.
Got it. 2 Thessalonians 2.
Look at that.
Your pretty face is in the screen.
If you want, you could read along in Greek because he has that on the screen, but we'll just stick with English.
Erotomen dat umas.
Oh, this is interesting. Hang on. I have a new Revised Standard. That's an NRSV up there?
I have NR. I'm sorry. I have ESV up there.
Okay. So I'm like, it must have updated it.
Fine. No.
That's still not it. See, this is
there you go.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
See, everyone who's listening says this whole video thing is terrible. Please just keep it to the audio.
You should see what we're doing, people. This is crazy.
All right, here we go. First 4 verses of chapter 2. As to the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ and our being gathered together to him, we beg you, brothers and sisters, not to be quickly shaken in mind or alarmed, either by spirit or by word or by letter, as though from us, to the effect that the day of the Lord is already here. Let no one deceive you in any way, for that day will not come unless the rebellion comes first and the lawless one is revealed, the one destined for destruction. He opposes and exalts himself above every so-called God or object of worship, so that he takes his seat in the temple of God, declaring himself to be God. So there's a lot of, this is obviously all end times stuff. I haven't read this in a while, but did you cover this in your understanding the New Testament and the end times? You didn't go there? Okay.
No.
So here we go. Your declarative word on it in this podcast.
Yeah.
But what's happening here?
That won't take long.
This is a difficult passage, and it doesn't seem to be that there's this
3 words. I don't know.
Well, I was going to say there's not a strong it doesn't seem, at least reading it, that there's a strong theological antecedent, meaning I don't know where else to go to relate to this. But I think a lot of people infer this, oh, he must be talking about this, and then they make connections, because this is a lot of familiar language, but it's a very cryptic passage.
Well, it's familiar language, but is it because we have wrapped it in this eschatological, this end times garb of the modern understanding of eschatology, and then we're trying to read this passage in light of that, and it just doesn't make sense if that's the case. And I think that's why there's so much confusion. So, all right, what's going on? Well, the first thing that's going on is Paul's like, don't let anyone deceive you. Mm-hmm. Apparently, they've got some correspondence that came. Paul says in verse 2, don't be quickly shaken. I'm looking at the New American Standard now. From your composure or disturbed by a spirit, a message, or a letter. Paul doesn't even know what it was that they got. It was a spirit, a message, or a letter, as if from us, to the effect that the day of the Lord has come. Let no one deceive you. It won't come. And then it goes on. So somebody gave some kind of communication to the church in Thessalonica saying that the day of the Lord has come. Spirit has, some spirit, the idea of some kind of promise of prophesying the end of the world. And we'll wrap this up a little bit, maybe better as we proceed. The biggest problem actually is in verse 5 here. Actually, let me go ahead and share the screen again. We'll bring it up in verse 5. And that is, New American Standard says, do you not remember that when I was still with you, I was telling you these things? This is a beautiful example. We've talked a lot, Vinnie, about the fact that these are occasional documents. And as an occasional document, what that means is the fact that Paul's writing at a specific time and place with a specific occasion and situation, and he's responding to something specifically. And our first answer is like, do you remember when I was with you, I was telling you these things? It's like, no, I don't remember, Paul. But because they remember, and he is assuming that they remember, he doesn't repeat himself. He doesn't say, well, this is what I was telling you. So we don't know what he was talking about. He doesn't repeat himself. This becomes extremely difficult. So a couple of things I'd say about this, just to kind of introduce the thing that's going on here, and then we'll get into it. One, I already mentioned, we kind of bring our end times baggage to this. And if we bring our end times baggage of like the end of the world, 7-year tribulation, the dispensational baggage that we've referred to a few times, this passage just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Likely, Paul is using apocalyptic language. And it probably goes back to 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, where Paul says in 1 Thessalonians 5, is like, while they're saying peace and safety, suddenly destruction will come upon them. And I think we discussed this on our last episode, that peace and safety was probably this language of the Roman Empire, that Rome was promising peace and safety to its people. And this is very likely to be read in an anti-imperial sense. I think the book of Revelation is the same thing. In other words, the empire is the problem, and whatever's going on in the empire, that hasn't happened yet. So I think that the blasphemy here is the boast of the emperor, and it just has to be read in the sense of there's going to be a judgment facing the empire. All right, so I'm kind of giving a long introduction here. All right, they may have thought, again, we're guessing here, the church in Thessalonica may have thought that with the resurrection of Jesus and the coming of the Spirit, the day of the Lord, which we'll discuss in just a minute, has arrived. And the only way you can do that would be, and they might mean some end times thing of that, like the eschaton's here, what we might call the New Jerusalem, which they clearly didn't have a conception of, a good conception of. They may have thought that it arrived in some spiritual way. I think what Paul's saying here is, yeah, Christ has certainly won the victory. There's no question that was part of their mindset. Because of the victory in Christ, that means Rome's been defeated. We're good to go. And the coming of the Spirit, that's good news, but there's still a future. And that future is where Rome will be judged. And Michael Gorman's going to do a wonderful job on this and saying what they fail to understand is that their suffering was the means through which God brings the day of the Lord, not that the day of the Lord hasn't come in fullness. It's simply the means to which this process happens. And I think it's so important for us as a church to realize that suffering, as we've said so many times, is what it means to follow Christ. Take up your cross and follow me. And I think, therefore, that's not the end, because there will be a day when there will be no more suffering. All right. So that help?
For sure. And one thing I'm hearing is you emphasizing how we've read our theological and eschatological baggage into a statement like this, because we've been told, oh, stuff's going to get really, really bad at the very end. We've been told that. And that actually ignores the New Testament story, which says, no, it's just going to be bad. This is what you should expect. And while Paul is using this apocalyptic language in 2 Thessalonians, almost every New Testament letter, and we'll start seeing this once we get out of Paul and we look at the other, what we call Catholic epistles, the universal letters.
Yeah.
Everyone is warning everyone about, or all the writers are warning everyone about false teaching and how it's going to be bad.
Exactly.
So this isn't like this thing that you look out for 2,000 years from now. This is just what it is.
Yeah, and that brings up another important caveat too, and that is the false teaching is in the church. The false teaching, and that's part of the end times deception that we have. Oh, some Antichrist figure, which we'll discuss here probably in this passage. Some Antichrist figure is going to come and do all these things and don't follow him. It's like, your conception of the Antichrist is like, no one's going to be deceived by that. Seriously? Yeah. So yeah. And anyways, all right, moving along.
Okay. So you did just mention Day of the Lord, and we did talk about this a few episodes back, but this is BY before YouTube. So
okay.
Right. We need to come up with another name for that before BV, before video. I don't know. But
that's before Vinnie.
Before Vinnie.
That was Determinetruth before Vinnie. We
the
can't do
dark
that.
days.
Yeah. I was alone.
You're a loner, Dottie, a rebel. If you know the reference from that comment on the YouTube video, what was that? Okay. See what I just did there? That was a way to get movement. See?
But I don't know I don't know. So I'm waiting for
you wouldn't, because you don't watch.
Moving on, go ahead.
All right. Day of the Lord. What is that a reference to? Is that just this new thing that he's coming up with? We did reference it a couple weeks ago, so we probably don't need to do a huge deep dive, but how do we want to look at that?
Yeah. The Day of the Lord refers to, throughout the Old Testament, and then the New Testament's picking up on this language, a time when God comes to bring judgment. We, because of our eschatological baggage, immediately assume that it means the end of the world. And it may mean that here, but clearly, Paul's answer is like, he could have simply said, look, Jesus hasn't returned yet. If that's what's fully going on there, how could they think that the day of the Lord has come if Jesus hasn't returned yet? So the day of the Lord is used, like several Old Testament references. I can just throw them out really quickly. Amos chapter 5, 18 through 20 talks about the day of the Lord coming, and it refers to the destruction of the Assyrians in the 8th century BC. The book of Obadiah talks about the day of the Lord in Obadiah 15, and it's the destruction of the nations, Edom and the nations surrounding it. Ezekiel 30 talks about the day of the Lord and its judgment upon Egypt. So Paul is probably reassuring them in this passage that Rome is going to be judged. So the day of the Lord is going to come on foreign empires and judgment. And it's not just judgment on the empires. The thing to remember, by the way, is because these foreign empires cause suffering for God's people, the day of the Lord is a day of relief and justice for us, where we rejoice. And so Paul's answer is, Rome will face the judgment, and that's going to be a key part of what the coming kingdom means.
Okay. How much of this idea, Day of the Lord, should we pull from Daniel, in Daniel chapter 11, which has a lot of what we read into as end times language for the future from now? And this is interesting because I don't feel like we've referenced Daniel in a while.
No.
As to where when we were doing the Revelation study that took a year, I mean, you're constantly going back to Daniel. And so Paul doesn't seem to use Daniel a whole lot, but I don't know. Is there any sort of Danielic language? Yeah,
there definitely is. And we've got a guest coming on next week to kind of wrap up our 1st and 2nd Thessalonians study. And we'll see if Gene Green, who's a great guy, by the way, wants to go there or not. We'll probably bring this passage up for discussion with him. So I almost hesitate to actually go there. Let me allude to it. And I don't think, if we go to the text, it just brings up so many issues in the book of Daniel that you and I chatted about before we started recording. Daniel chapter 11 and Daniel chapter 10 and 11 refer to some like prophetic script that's being played out with the coming of the Greeks. And it seems that Daniel 11 and 12 is referring to the coming of a man named Antiochus IV Epiphanes, who comes in the 2nd century BC, does all kinds of chaotic things. He set himself up in the temple, put an altar to Zeus on the altar in the Jerusalem temple, forbids sacrifices for the Jewish people. This was a catastrophic event for the Jewish nation. The book of Maccabees is written at this particular time. Purim, the Jewish festival of Purim, happens after the temple is rededicated, and Hanukkah, the rededication of all that. so there's a lot, and it's very likely in Daniel 11:30 through 45, which we're just not going to go to because it's just too much in there. Describes some final enemy that will attack the covenant community of God. And it even says that he's going to use smooth words. And then it talks about in verse 30, I think, of Daniel chapter 11, that there's going to be many who forsake the covenant because they're going to be won over. But notice that this actually fits with what Paul's doing here because the context is a pagan ruler who's bringing destruction upon God's people and leading God's people astray. And he's going to persecute those who remain faithful. And Paul's like, yeah, Rome's going to get what it deserves. So I think, and so he's building upon that understanding. How much of that understanding was prevalent in the church in Thessalonica? It probably was there.
Okay.
Because, I mean, this is a real event for the Jewish people in the first century. Because
for sure. Like this is a historical event.
Yeah. This is, and Maccabees are just, the book of Maccabees, of course, do they belong in the biblical canon? Of course, Catholics have accepted some of them, but not all of them. There's 4 books of Maccabees. So yeah, this is where they're resonating.
Okay. In general, how quick should we be to jump back to Daniel to start inserting theological things when we're doing eschatology, especially jumping into something like a 2 Thessalonians? Do we jump too quickly?
No. The language that's being used, whether it's day of the Lord or whatever it might be, is coming from the Old Testament. The problem that we have when we interpret things like this is we take it from its Old Testament context and assume that it remains in that same contextual meaning in the New Testament. But clearly the Jesus story, the coming of the Spirit, the conversion of the Gentiles, all that is changing what the Old Testament authors didn't understand that. Remember the scroll of Daniel in Daniel 12 is like, seal this up, Daniel. What does it mean? When's this going to happen? He asked in Daniel chapter 12. I'm not telling you. In the New Testament, the scroll is unveiled. And I think what we have to realize is the fact that the Old Testament authors didn't understand exactly what they were talking about when it referred to these things. They didn't. Did they see the divine Son of God coming to the earth, dying on a cross, rising again? Well, it's there, but I don't know that they saw that happen. Did they see the conversion of the Gentiles as part of the larger scope? I don't. So I think we have to be careful. The Old Testament meaning is where the language comes from, but how is it being employed in the New Testament world? It's not always a simple.
So let me throw something out there so I could get your input on it.
Okay.
And this is the way I've come. I know where I'm at now in terms of understanding this. So a number of years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I taught through Daniel, like in a Sunday school class.
Yeah.
First time really diving into, especially chapters 10, 11, and 12, 10 and 11, all the history. And there's, your major views. And actually this goes back also in terms of Daniel chapter 2, which is paralleled with Daniel chapter 7. And like, what are the countries, what are the nations that are represented by, like, in Daniel chapter 2, like the four nations that are represented in Nebuchadnezzar's dream, right? And so usually you have like a Greek view or a Roman view. Okay. In terms of like, who the last view represents.
The 4 are.
Yeah, the 4 views. Well, I've always assumed a Roman view because that's the
New Testament.
The New Testament view. But what I've come to the opinion, and I still don't know what to do with this, if I'm just reading Daniel,
exactly,
it looks like he's talking about Greece.
Yes, he's talking about Antichrist.
And especially as you come to chapters 10 and 11, it's like this is talking about what's happening with Alexander the Great and Antiochus the Fourth and all these things. However, Jesus seems to be interpreting this in light of Rome, which is like a shift in the interpretation.
In Matthew 24, Mark 13, you're referring to. Yeah.
So is that the problem is we've been trained in a systematic way in the West to how to read the Bible, and it can only mean one thing. And so it either means Rome or it means Greece. And I'm like, it seems to mean both, depending on the perspective you're coming from. And I still haven't like fully formed what I do with this, but that's where I kind of left it at.
Yeah, I'm actually forgetting the language right now. It's escaping me. So there's good here and there's great danger here. Okay. So our first role with reading the book of Daniel is to read Daniel out of its context. What did Daniel say? What did he mean? What would his readers have understood? And and I know we're going to get beyond a few of our readers, but our listeners. But Daniel's very likely has a Greek view in mind, okay? That the 4th beast is Greece, and that Antiochus the 4th is whatever it is. That's the whole key of Daniel. Jesus comes along and says, okay, look, what we're referring to here is has a Roman application as well. Now, some will take that to mean, oh, it has a dual fulfillment. It's fulfilled here and it's fulfilled here. And that can lead to a lot of danger and a lot of heretical understandings. I'm going to say heretical. Maybe I'll say, aberrant, anyways, especially when it comes to end time stuff. Like, oh, it was fulfilled. What people will do without, since we're on the topic, Vinnie, is to say, some will say, oh, Jesus fulfills that passage and it's going to be fulfilled in the future with Israel. Like, no, what happens in the New Testament is that the scriptures are read through the lens of Christ. So that, for example, and let's go a little bit controversial here, but that's good. Isaiah chapter 7 talks about a virgin birth. Kind of. If you're just reading Isaiah, it's not a virgin birth. It's a young maiden who's going to give birth. And it says in Isaiah 7, we're not bringing the passage up, I think it's okay. Yeah. It says that before the child is old enough to know good or evil, these kings whom you dread will come and do da 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 da. That's clearly referring to something happening in Isaiah's time, because the kings whom you dread are the kings of the north, right? Assyria and Ephraim, and they're gonna, or Syria and Ephraim, and they're gonna come in and do these. And so the child that is born in chapter 8 of Isaiah, okay, that's the context of Isaiah. The New Testament comes along, Matthew comes along and reads it in light of Christ, and this is always the key. So if it has a second fulfillment, I don't like that language. It's a Christological fulfillment, and the idea of that is that this was also pointing us to Jesus. Now, for us to say, oh, therefore, Jesus is the fulfillment and a future Israel and a future, that's going beyond the realm. Reading it Christologically is what the New Testament authors do. I hope I'm being clear on this. They're reading it Christologically saying, hey, this happened and this meant this, but it also means this in Christ, not like, oh, in literal Israel or in literal, it's like, or in the end time. No. So I think if we stay within those parameters, so yeah, Daniel's talking about this. The New Testament understands it in light of Christ to have this fulfillment as well. But I don't like the idea of dual fulfillment because that often has this Christian Zionist dispensational tinge to it.
Well, and it's just arbitrary, because then you could say, oh, it must mean this here. You're creating a future prophecy, if you will, when that was not intended to be the original meaning of the text.
Right. And maybe I'll just to say it again, just in case I'm not clear, because I think some people might still be confused. Hosea 11 says, out of Egypt did I call my son. Okay. And when you read Hosea, it's not a prophecy at all. It's looking back to the Exodus. Hosea is reminding his people that God called them out of Egypt and led them out. God's the great rescuer. Matthew quotes that in Matthew chapter 2 and says, it's applied to Jesus. And interestingly, either it could be in Matthew 2, whether Jesus, when he went to Egypt as a child, because his family left because Herod was going to kill the babies in Bethlehem, or it could be understood as when Jesus left Egypt. We won't get into that right now, but Matthew gives this Christological application. What's happening there is it's not happening twice. It was fulfilled then, it was fulfilled then. It's not even a prophecy in Hosea. What Matthew and the New Testament writers are doing is saying the scriptures are about Jesus. It was pointing us to him all along. And if we see a second meaning, if we want to, I don't even like saying it that way. Yeah. But that might be simple for now. A second meaning, it's always in Christ. It's always about Christ. It's not about something else that's going to happen. So that's what we're saying, hey, this was about this in the Old Testament context, but the fulfillment happens. It was pointing us to Jesus. Thus, the virgin birth of Isaiah 7 was Isaiah's son, but Matthew says, actually, it's Jesus as well. And some people are uncomfortable with that, by the way.
Sure. Well,
the text is pretty clear.
As you're talking about it, this is where I'm starting to put this together. You and I both grew up being formed by our love for apologetics. And one of the downfalls I feel of apologetics is that it puts everything into the systematic theology category. Yeah. And it oftentimes ignores exegesis. And exegesis meaning the interpreting of the scripture.
The process of interpreting the Bible. Okay, very good.
And so we make something like those passages in Hosea, or even something like Jonah, Jesus equating being, the resurrection being, to being Jonah in the 3 days in the belly of the fish. Yeah. So I'm thinking of stuff like, oh gosh, what's his name? I probably have that book down here. Maybe I don't. Josh McDowell. The case or evidence. that demands a verdict.
Demands a verdict.
Yeah.
Yep.
You get stuff like this. You get the Case for Christ, Lee Strobel stuff, which is immensely popular in the 70s, 80s, 90s.
And largely pretty good works.
Lots of good stuff in there. Great scholars are in there.
Yeah.
The thing is, though, it's turned all of those into prophecies. Like, oh, look at all these Old Testament prophecies that were now fulfilled, where it's like, well, that wasn't a prophecy. The point of it wasn't a prophecy. And we're missing the exegetical or the hermeneutical aspect of it. No, they were reading Jesus into the Old Testament text. They weren't, it wasn't a prophecy that had not yet been fulfilled.
That's right. And Christopher Wright has some wonderful books on, what is it? You might remember the title of it, reading the Old Testament in light of Jesus or something like that.
I know where it's out on my bookshelf, and I'm trying to find it.
Okay, I got rid of all my books, so I don't have them. I don't have it any longer. So.
It's something like that. Jesus, Christ in the Old Testament, or I forget what it. Yeah.
And that's the idea. So it's the problem with the McDowell and the fundamentalism and the apologetics that we grew up with is that everything has to have a nice, tidy answer. And so Isaiah 7 is actually a prophecy of the virgin birth. In Isaiah 7, and it's like, no, it's not. Isaiah 7 is talking about Isaiah's own child that was born in Isaiah chapter 8, because it says, the two kings whom you dread, this is going to happen before the child's even old enough. But Matthew understands it Christologically, totally fine. Are they playing with the scriptures? Yeah, they're playing with the scriptures, but they're playing with the scriptures in light of the Christ story that we know he died and rose. We accept the truth of that story. And the other thing, by the way, is, remember Matthew, this might calm some hearts down a little bit. Matthew was written with, it looks like a largely Jewish type of aura, maybe to a Jewish community, if not, maybe beyond that, but had a strong Jewish element.
Yeah.
This is what the Jewish world was doing at the time of the New Testament. So the Qumran community, we won't go into the Dead Sea Scroll community, they were doing the same thing. And they said, oh, Daniel is about the teacher of righteousness, which was the teacher of, we think, the leader of the Qumran community that may even have been before Jesus, or we're not sure when, but they read the Bible in light of this one teacher of righteousness, and Matthew's doing the same thing, saying, actually, it's about Jesus. The difference is, we think Matthew was right because of the crucifixion, resurrection, and the coming of the Spirit. This makes sense. And so and Jesus himself said, if you believe Moses, you believe me, because Moses wrote about me, John chapter 5. It seems like this is the way they interpreted the scriptures, and Matthew's partaking in a practice that was accepted in the time, and we think that Matthew did it correctly.
So it's not going back to even the first example you used. It's not denying a virgin birth. It's just saying Isaiah wasn't prophesying about that. But this is the way that Matthew applied it, or the gospel writers applied it in speaking of Jesus.
Yeah. So do I believe in the virgin birth? Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So this all becomes a hermeneutical thing. And unfortunately, our modern systematic theology, and I put apologetics under the realm of systematic theology.
I understand why.
Yeah. And it just, unfortunately, sometimes it tries so hard to make a point that it will ignore and kind of, cast away the hermeneutical side of things.
Yeah.
At Determined Truth, we do more than just this podcast. One of our major projects is training pastors in India each week. We even help start a Bible college there. But we could only do this because of the generous support from partners like you. Seriously, that means you. If you consider supporting us with a fully tax-deductible donation with anything from $5 a month or more, we can continue to equip the church to be the church. To give, go to determinetruth.com and click on the Give tab, or find the link in today's show notes. Thanks.
Okay, let's talk about the big ticket item in this passage, the man of lawlessness. This is usually associated with the Antichrist or the beast of Revelation. There, oftentimes these three figures are seen as synonymous with one another. It's the same person, that just authors are using different terms to talk about. Is that what we should be doing here?
Really tough. So some will take verses 3 and 4 to say, well, this is not going to happen, Paul says, until the apostasy comes first, and then the man of lawlessness is revealed, who's the son of destruction. And in verse 4, he's going to go in and exalt himself over every so-called God or object of worship. He's going to take a seat in the temple of God, displaying himself as being God. Okay. Now, this is definitely Daniel language, and this is definitely Antiochus IV Epiphanes language that's going on there. What does the apostasy refer to? Well, really different. It certainly has no idea of a rapture, because the whole context is, if it was a rapture, then the rapture stuff just doesn't make any sense for all kinds of reasons. It seems to suggest that there will be this ruler. Let me step back, actually. First off, associating this with the Antichrist is highly problematical because who or what even is the Antichrist? The Antichrist, the word Antichrist, only occurs, I think, like 5 times in 1st and 2nd John. And actually, let's go there, Vinny, if we can. 1st John, let me share my screen. Chapter 2, right there, verses 19 through 23. 1st John, chapter 2. All right. You want to read this is your main Antichrist passage, or the first time it really even occurs. 1 John 2, 18. If you want to go 18 through 20 through 19 is really all we really need.
Okay.
Yeah.
Children, it is the last hour. As you have heard that Antichrist is coming, so now many Antichrists have come. From this we know that it is the last hour. They went out from us, but they did not belong to us. For if they had belonged to us, they would have remained with us. But by going out, they made it plain that none of them belongs to us.
All right.
Verse 19.
That's
Okay,
good.
yeah.
Yeah, that's good. All right, so I'm looking here at the New American Standard. Okay, both say Antichrist. So the word Antichrist here in the Greek, there's no article in front of it, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's not the Antichrist or a. It's hard to translate as an Antichrist or an Antichrist. Or
the article just means the word the.
Yeah, the article means the word the. Thanks. I'm sorry about that. And Greek doesn't always use the word the way we use it. They will say like the when we would not use it, and then they won't say it when we would use it. So these translations are simply saying that Antichrist. So some will go the Antichrist, like, but did John have a concept of the Antichrist and what is it? But notice what he says about the Antichrist. By the way, one knows, he says it's the last hour. So we're not only in the last days, we're in the last hour, whatever that. Right.
Like 2,000 years ago, it is the last hour.
Yeah, they went out from us. So many Antichrists have appeared. What do we know about them? They went out from us. They were not really of us. For if they had been of us, they would have remained with us, but they went out, so it would be shown that they're not of us. So whatever the Antichrists here are, they're people who left the church. In other words, it's not a political ruler. It's not Rome. These are people that were in the church, maybe false teachers in the church, and they were deceiving the congregation. So there's a lot of deception, but they were not a political ruler. So to associate that with the idea of the man of lawlessness here in 2 Thessalonians is 2 Thessalonians has some kind of Rome, Antiochus mindset here, and I don't think that's what's going on. The next problem becomes if you try to take this to an application of a future, okay, like an end time situation. The phrase "the temple of God," because it says he'll enter the temple of God, occurs I think 11 times in the New Testament. In every single occurrence, and maybe this one's an exception, and there's one quote unquote exception. It refers to the body of Jesus himself, destroy the temple of God, and in 3 days I'll raise it up, or to the church, you are the temple of God. So it's a very specific phrase. And it's in the book of Revelation chapter 11, it's the temple, it's God's people, it's us. It's no question, it's the 2 witnesses. So if we want to take this to some end times thing that Paul's predicting what's going to happen at the end of the world, I think he's talking about Rome and something that's going to happen in Rome. And does it transcend to some like future Antichrist person? The problem with the future Antichrist doesn't have anything to do with a political ruler. In 1 John, it seems to have something to do with false teachers in the church that left us. And then we tie it to the beast of Revelation 13. Okay. The problem with that is that if he goes into the temple of God comes to mean without question by today, the church. So that doesn't fit our end time scenario of like, because the Antichrist is going to make a peace treaty with Rome, with Israel. And like, so the whole idea of if we take this passage, I hope I'm being clear, we take this passage and apply it to the future, then we have to understand temple of God as being something with regard to the church and some false pagan ruler coming into the church bringing deception. Okay, that might fit Revelation more than we think, but I don't think that's where we're going here. If we take it to the 1st century, then, well, temple of God could be the Jerusalem temple because it still exists at the time of Paul. And that's what it means in Daniel. But I'm left where we're going to bring in Gene Green next week. Go, Gene, what do we do here? Because I think what Paul's talking about is beyond us, because when I was with you, I was telling you these things. Don't you remember that? And we're like, no, we don't know what you're talking about, Paul. So I think that's the best we can do. So I wouldn't apply this in an eschatological context.
So just to clarify, let's give Cliff Notes for our viewers who remember that. So the anti, if we're just
that was Chat
identify,
GPT before Chat GPT,
right?
Yeah, that's right.
And you don't got to go to Barnes and Noble to buy it.
Mm-hmm.
So Antichrist is not. There's not an Antichrist, and Antichrist isn't a future thing we should be looking forward to.
Right.
According to John, there's many Antichrists. They were existing 2,000 years ago. And they're not a political figure. It's not Gorbachev. It's not anything like that. It's not Obama. It's going to be someone from within the church. So that's how we could categorize the biblical understanding of Antichrist.
False teachers in the church who've left the church, they were trying to deceive you and lead you astray. No, they went out from us, but they did not really belong to us.
They're ones who deny that Jesus rose from the dead, right? Or is the Messiah.
And when he says that you've heard that Antichrist is coming, do we understand that as the Antichrist? As like the text doesn't, the Greek we can't be certain of the Greek, whether it's the Antichrist or the spirit of Antichrist.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
That would be the problem.
But right now, this isn't what we're dealing with because Paul's not using Antichrist. That's John's term. And so Paul is talking about man of lawlessness. So let's ask this question. Does man of lawlessness seem to be speaking about someone from within the church who is deceiving and left? Is that what it's talking about?
No, I think man of lawlessness has to be understood as some Roman. So it's not synonymous
with Antichrist then, right off the bat.
No, not at all.
Part of it is building up what is it and then figuring out, okay, what it's not. So, okay, we could clear those things out. Then they're not the same person. So what is it? And that's when you went into the Daniel talk. And this is Paul using Danielic language to come up with some sort of figure who was going to do something.
Yeah. And there's historical precedent in the recent past for Paul. So if these letters are written early 50s, 20 years or so after the death and resurrection of Jesus, in the year 40, the Emperor Caligula, who was, I mean, I didn't know him well, but he seems like a palace brat to me. He's like 27 years old. He died at age 28 in the year 41. And he decided that he was going to put a statue of himself in the temple in Jerusalem, in the complex in Jerusalem, which Antiochus had done. And so this was thought to have this Danielic relationship there. Everyone was like, don't do it, because everyone knew, like, you know how when you go to the Olympics or when you watch the Olympics on TV, and Albania comes out, and then Algeria, right? And they all march and they have a standard bearer at the front of the line that's holding the flag of that nation. When Rome marched into a city, the standard bearer would always be marching first with the flags of the country or whatever it might be. Well, those flags had images of the emperor on it.
Mm-hmm.
And the Jews have a strong conviction, have no graven images in my presence, meaning the temple area. So you can't have Roman coins in the temple. You can't have these images, these standards flying around the city of Jerusalem. So this was forbidden to have any kind of symbol of the emperor in the vicinity of Jerusalem. So Caligula tries to have this image of himself put there. Lots of resistance. He got assassinated before it happened. But there's a great fear among the Jewish people that this Antiochus story of Hanukkah and Purim 200 years earlier was going to happen again. And it could be something with that mindset, especially if this is the Jewish community that's thinking this. And if that's the case, then temple of God means the Jerusalem temple here. But so, okay, you can see how much trouble we have here.
Sure, yeah. I think the important thing is to recognize as we process through this is not a clear cookie cutter jigsaw thing where you just pull this passage out and neatly slide it into some passage in Matthew 25 or 24 or in Revelation, and all of a sudden it becomes this grand masterpiece that's clear. This is a specific situation that Paul was speaking to. And that's what we need to remember. And it's actually not very clear. Would you say this is as unclear as reading, is it 1 Corinthians and talking about baptism for the dead?
No, I think this is way more difficult.
Oh, okay.
I think this might be, there's a passage in James as well, but this might be one of the most difficult passages in the New Testament. Yeah. Especially because he says right here, don't you remember that when I was with you, I was telling you these things. So important to remember, as we said already, it's an occasional document, and we don't know the occasion here because we don't know what Paul was telling them when he was with them. So,
because it would be pretty ridiculous if, don't you remember while I was with you and telling you these things, to remember them for 2,000 years from now?
Especially when he doesn't repeat them. So yeah, unless the telephone game has been happening for 2,000 years, unless somebody wrote down what it was he was telling them, how is it going to be transmitted to us? You know, maybe a second century church father, maybe Justin Martyr goes, oh, Paul was saying these things. And we can go, oh, that makes sense. Oh, maybe Justin's correct. But nobody grapples with this to help us understand it. So,
Okay.
How about let's go to verses 6 through 12, and we'll
Yeah.
wrap it up with this and kind of get some context what's going on here, and maybe some quick application.
And you know what is now restraining him, so that he may be revealed when his time comes. For the mystery of lawlessness is already at work, but only until the one who now restrains it is removed. And then the lawless one will be revealed, whom the Lord Jesus will destroy with the breath of his mouth, annihilating him by the manifestation of his coming. The coming of the lawless one is apparent in the working of Satan, who uses all power, signs, lying wonders, and every kind of wicked deception for those who are perishing, because they refuse to love the truth and so be saved. For this reason, God sends them a powerful delusion, leading them to believe what is false, so that all who have not believed the truth, but took pleasure in unrighteousness, will be condemned.
All right. Self-explanatory, I think, right?
Yeah, right?
Yeah. All right. So I highlighted the word parousia here in verse 1.
Okay.
As the coming of our Lord. That's the coming of a king, the arrival of a king. And it appears again here in verse 7. Verse 8. The coming of a king. And it seems that there's a contrast between the coming of the Roman emperor and the coming of Christ. That's our context. But here's the next problem. All right. And I'll highlight it. It's highlighted here on my notes. I'm going to go to New American Standard because I'm used to looking at it. Okay. Verse 6. You know what restrains him.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, verse 6, here we go. What restrains him? Okay, great. The problem is, as you can see, Vinnie, this is in the neuter case. It's like, okay, so Greek has masculine, feminine, and neuter. It's an it. It's not a he. So it's what, not who restrains him, but what restrains him. But now look at verse 7. All of a sudden, the one who's restraining him, it's masculine. The one who's, and this is a participle, the one who's restraining him. And so it's translated here as he who now restrains. It's like, wait a minute. You know what restrains him, and by the way, and it's the mystery's already at work until he changes gender, and we can't explain this. I have no idea what's going on here in this particular text. It's like,
well, to an English only reader, that might not be a huge deal, but when you're reading it in Greek, it's very problematic.
It's two different things.
Mm-hmm.
So and people say, oh, it's the Holy Spirit's the one who's restraining him. And when the Holy Spirit's takes us out of the way, then he's going to come. That's where you have the 7-year tribulation rapture idea coming from. It's like, that doesn't make sense why it's neuter in one case and masculine in the other. It's like, it doesn't fit. So yeah, we have those kind of problems as well. So.
Okay.
All right.
So what do we do with this?
Yeah. Well, what we do with this is the fact that we recognize that suffering and persecution is a part and parcel of what it means to be a member of the kingdom of God, that their suffering was not a sign that the day of the Lord has already come, that their suffering was a sign that the day of the Lord's in process, and it will end when Christ returns. And that's when, how long, O Lord, how long, as the prophets Isaiah says, the Psalms say, in the book of Revelation, chapter 6 says. And when Christ returns, our suffering will end. Until then, the day of the Lord has not come in terms of its fullness. Christ will come and destroy the enemies, and they will find judgment, and we will be relieved. But suffering is what it means to be a member of the follower of Christ. And until then, we plug along.
Well, and Paul seems to indicate that the presence of this lawless one, it's going to be around for a while. So just as Paul experienced it 2,000 years ago, we're still going to experience the presence and the power of this lawless one, and that goes along with the suffering. He's here, and that's why we suffer.
Yeah, and it says it's in accordance with the work of Satan. So if I were to make any connection to it, I'm going to do this cautiously because I don't think we have to have this passage to make this connection. But if this passage fits with what I think is happening in Revelation 13 and in the Gospels as well. So Jesus tells Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. You don't have in mind the things of God, but the things of man." What happened was Jesus. This is Mark chapter 8. Jesus has just simply said, "Hey, I'm going to suffer many things. We're going to Jerusalem. I'm going to suffer and die." And Peter rebukes Jesus. And then Jesus rebukes Peter saying, no, the idea of not suffering is the way of Satan. That goes back to the garden. What's going on in the garden? And the garden is going to be, who is your Lord? Who's the king? Whose kingdom are we going to follow? The kingdom of humanity, well, it looks good for food, it's pleasing to the eye, and it's going to make us wise. Let's eat. The kingdom of humanity is a kingdom that brings conflict and violence and suffering. But if you're in power, you can escape that suffering. And I think that's where Peter was going. I hope I'm being clear. That Peter was saying, no, Jesus, we want a kingdom that comes without you having to suffer, without us having to suffer. The problem with that is that when you have a kingdom that comes that way, everybody below you suffers. That's just the nature of empires. You know, those who rule, Vladimir Putin's eating the same food today, as we said before, that he was eating 3 years ago when the war in Ukraine started. But the people in Russia are dying and the people in Ukraine are dying. Netanyahu's life hasn't changed a whole lot, but the people in Gaza sure has. And the average Israeli's life has sure changed a whole lot. And Trump's still doing, that's what happens when we rule for our own sake. And I think that's what's going on. So if this is in accord, the lawless one's coming in accordance with the work of Satan, it's humanity ruling for self at the expense of everybody else. The kingdom of God, however, comes and says, we suffer for the sake of we rule by suffering. We lay down our lives. And by laying down our lives for others, we make a world of justice and peace, if it were imposed upon the world, for everyone. Everyone has at least what they need. And that's in Eden. Had you listened to the Lord and not eaten from the tree, God would have been our source of wisdom. And when God's the source of wisdom, we rule by relying on him. And when we rule by relying on him and not our own self-interest, we create a world of justice and peace. This is that larger biblical story. And I would fit this passage into it, saying that the coming of this lawless one will be in accordance with the work of Satan. And if that's the case, then I think this is happening today. And that's what I'm doing in the Revelation Revealed series on our YouTube channel, saying, I think what Revelation 13 is saying is that the church is going to go in cahoots with the empire because we benefit from the empire. And we get comfort and power and pleasure. And we don't want to sacrifice those things for the sake of the poor and the oppressed, like we did the 4 or 5 weeks we've done on poverty. Like, I don't want to give that stuff up so that they don't deserve it. That's the propaganda of empire. That's the way I would wrap this up. But I can't be certain that that's what Paul's saying here.
Yeah, that's good. Difficult passage. So next week, I don't know if Joel Green. Joel Green's a big deal. Joel Green's a big deal. Gene Green's not. No, yeah, right. Give a little bit of a tease on who Gene Green is, because he might just not be as popular of a name as some of the other names we've had on.
He's a former professor at Wheaton College and graduate school. A really, really neat guy. I was able to have dinner with him a couple weeks ago, and I'm like, oh, I've read his commentaries on Thessalonians, and he's written commentaries on a number of different biblical books. Did a lot of work in Latin America, so he's very fluent in Spanish. So if he starts speaking in tongues, we're gonna have to get somebody to interpret it. But a really neat guy and a really nice guy, and a brilliant, brilliant scholar, retired professor from Wheaton.
Yeah, it's gonna be an exciting interview to have. Hey, if you're enjoying this, if you've made it this far, hopefully it's because you enjoyed it. But please, once again, we're really starting to kick this up with the YouTube video. So if you could, like it, if you liked it, subscribe, make a comment on something. If you've thought about this topic or you haven't thought about this topic, put your thoughts in the comments and we'll try to respond as best we can. Yeah. But what's going on for you? What have you always understood the man of lawlessness to be? Chime in there. And if you're one of our listeners on the regular podcast, audio only, hey, you don't have to watch the whole video. I wouldn't want to watch us either. Let's be honest.
I know.
But you could come in and you could engage on the video, so you could at least talk there and we could chat it out. So
you realize you just opened a can of worms. You're going to get a lot of stuff in the chat on the Man of Lawlessness, but hopefully.
Great.
We'll
That's awesome.
I don't know that we're going to engage with it all, but we'll try.
We'll try. All right, everyone. Hope you guys have a great week.
See you next week.
Time.
Oh, I got it.
No, I got it. I'll edit it, so I'll make sure mine goes first.
There you go.
The power of the computer. All right, everyone. Catch you guys later.
Thanks for joining us today. If you dug it, please subscribe and share it with others. Check us out at Determinetruth.com to see more of what we do and maybe even consider supporting us. See you next time.
Faith is an ocean.